Black couple moves into luxury neighborhood. What happens next exposes everything. The whispers started before they even reached the front door. A quiet hum of judgment, dressed in polite smiles and folded arms. When Marcus and Alana stepped into the bright, echoing hall of the community clubhouse, the air shifted, just slightly, but enough to feel. Eyes flickered. A woman at the sign-in table blinked twice before forcing a grin. "Oh, you must be guests?" "No," Marcus said gently. "Homeowners." A silence heavier than the chandeliers followed. Someone coughed. Another muttered, "Must be the wrong address." Alana felt the weight of every stare, the subtle disbelief pressing on her skin. They took their seats anyway, holding hands beneath the polished oak table, pretending not to notice the way conversations lowered, the way smiles sharpened. Then came the question, sharp as glass, tossed from the back of the room. "Do you have proof you actually own your house?" The room went still. Marcus's lips curved into the smallest, calmest smile. He knew this wasn't the last test. But no one in that room had any idea who they had just challenged. Marcus and Alana Carter had worked their entire lives for this. The quiet streets lined with sycamores, the manicured lawns, the illusion of safety wrapped in wealth. To the world, they were the image of success. Marcus, a calm and sharp-witted civil rights attorney, known for dismantling discriminatory systems with a surgeon's precision. Alana, a gallery curator who used art to tell stories of pain and resilience. Stories people in neighborhoods like this preferred to forget. They were proud to be a black couple in a space few had been invited to before. Yet even pride felt fragile here. Their first week in Crestwood Heights should have been peaceful. Late walks with coffee, friendly neighbors, quiet nights. Instead, it was a slow reveal, the welcome basket that never came. The neighbor who smiled at their faces but double-checked her locks when they passed. The HOA notice about property standards the very next morning, sent only to them. Racism here didn't shout. It whispered in careful tones and careful emails. It wore perfume and pearls. At night, Alana would sit on their porch, the scent of jasmine in the air, watching porch lights flick on as they walked by, one after another, like a silent alarm. Marcus told her not to let it get to her. "They'll come around," he said softly, though even he didn't believe it yet. He'd faced racism in courtrooms, overt, cold, and weaponized. But this was different. It was polite, smiling, dressed in respectability, the kind that hides behind laughter and concern. By the time the next community meeting rolled around, rumors had already taken root. Someone whispered they were renting. Another said they must have won a lawsuit. But Marcus and Alana didn't move to Crestwood Heights to shrink. They moved to belong and to remind people like these that dignity doesn't ask permission. So when they entered that hall again, heads high and hearts steady, they weren't just attending a meeting. They were walking into a test of who they were and who this community truly was. Because behind the smiles and the garden parties, something darker waited to be exposed. Marcus and Alana's names vanished from group texts about community events. Their invitations must have gotten lost. When Alana offered to volunteer for the neighborhood cleanup, the committee smiled tightly and said, "We've already got it covered." Each gesture was small, each slight deniable. Yet together they built a wall, invisible but thick as concrete. Alana tried to convince herself it was all misunderstanding. She filled her days with her work, planning the new exhibition at her gallery. Unspoken Lines, a showcase of black artists confronting silence and identity. But at night, her optimism thinned. She could still hear the woman at the last meeting. "Do you have proof you actually own your house?" Marcus noticed her hesitation at the mailbox, the way she double-checked the door locks, the way her laughter faded mid-sentence. He knew that kind of exhaustion, the kind that comes not from what's said, but from what's implied. One Saturday, A notice appeared on their door. An anonymous concerned neighbor had reported excessive noise from their last dinner party, a quiet evening with jazz and 4 friends. The note ended with, "We value peace and tradition in this neighborhood." Tradition. The word lingered like poison. Marcus stood there for a long moment, then folded the letter neatly and placed it on the counter. "You know what tradition used to mean," he said softly. Alana didn't answer. She didn't have to. They could have fought back right then, filed a complaint, confronted the HOA, demanded justice. But instead, Marcus smiled the kind of smile that carried both patience and strategy. "We'll let them show themselves," he said. And they did. At the next meeting, when Marcus and Alana entered, the conversations once again paused. Someone was discussing property values, someone else about keeping the community standards high. Their eyes flicked to the couple, then quickly away. But this time, Marcus spoke first, calm, controlled, commanding. He asked about diversity in community programs, about representation in leadership, about why only certain houses were randomly inspected by the HOA. The room grew tense. A few smiled nervously. The chairwoman cleared her throat and said, "We don't see color here." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "That's the problem," he said quietly. That night, as they drove home beneath streetlights that seemed just a little too bright, Alana looked at him and said, "They'll never accept us, will they?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. The fight wasn't about acceptance. It was about exposure, showing what hides behind polished gates and polite conversation. And so they began to plan something the neighborhood would never forget. A charity gala, hosted in their own home, for social justice and education reform. The same people who whispered about them would soon step into their living room and see exactly who they'd been trying to ignore. If you've ever felt that kind of quiet prejudice, the kind that smiles to your face but shuts the door behind you, take a second to like this video. It's how these stories find the people who refuse to stay silent. The night of the gala glowed like something out of a magazine. Strings of amber lights draped across the Carter residence, soft jazz spilling through open windows. Cars lined the cul-de-sac, black sedans, silver coupes, the kind of vehicles that whispered status. For once, the neighbors didn't whisper. They marveled. Curiosity had drawn them here, wrapped in curiosity and guilt. After weeks of subtle disdain, they couldn't resist the invitation that had arrived in elegant gold foil. An evening for change. A charity gala benefiting equal access to justice. Inside, the house shimmered. Art from Alana's gallery hung on every wall, each piece a story of strength and survival. Waiters glided through the rooms. Laughter mingled with live piano. For a moment, the air felt pure. Then Marcus took the stage, calm, poised, every eye turned. He thanked them for coming, his voice steady, rich with quiet confidence. He spoke of community, of the power of unity and the cost of silence. Then he mentioned his work, civil rights law, systemic reform, and how, over the years, he had represented dozens of companies, some of which belonged to people sitting in that very room. A ripple passed through the crowd. Recognition flickered. One man's glass froze mid-air. Another shifted uncomfortably. The same homeowners who had doubted their place were now realizing who exactly their neighbor was, the man who had defended their reputations, their contracts, their legacies. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't need to. His words carried the weight of every unspoken insult, every polite dismissal. Alana watched from across the room, her heart swelling, not with revenge, but with pride. The quiet, sharp kind that comes from winning with dignity. When Marcus ended his speech, there was no applause at first. Just silence, the kind that reveals more truth than sound ever could. Then, slowly, it began. One clap, then another. And soon, the same people who had once questioned if they belonged were standing in their living room, forced to see them, really see them, for the first time. When the last car pulled away and the quiet of midnight settled back over Crestwood Heights, Alana stood by the window, her hand resting against the cool glass. Outside, the same street that once felt like a border now felt different, lighter somehow, as if the weight of unspoken judgment had cracked, even just a little. Marcus joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "You think they'll change?" she asked softly. He exhaled. "Maybe not tonight, but they'll remember." And they would, because nothing unsettles the comfortable quite like the grace of those they once dismissed. In the days that followed, subtle shifts appeared. The neighbor who once clutched her purse now waved from across the street. A man who'd avoided eye contact stopped by with flowers, his apology awkward but real. Even the HOA, silent for weeks, sent a public note of thanks for bringing the community together. Marcus and Alana didn't respond. They didn't need to. Their response had already echoed louder than words. The truth is, racism doesn't always wear hatred. Sometimes it hides in the warmth of civility, in smiles that never reach the eyes. But when faced with dignity, calm, intelligent, undeniable, that mask starts to crack. They hadn't moved to Crestwood Heights to make a point. They came to live, to belong, to exist without explanation. But in doing so, they reminded everyone around them that inclusion isn't charity. It's justice. On their porch, beneath the same jasmine-scented air that once carried whispers, Marcus looked out at the rows of perfect houses and said, "They thought they were judging us. Turns out, we were holding up the mirror." Alana smiled, not with triumph, but peace. Because sometimes victory isn't in proving people wrong. It's in showing them what right truly looks like. And for anyone who's ever been told, even in silence, that they don't belong, this was proof. You don't need permission to exist in any space your effort has earned. Stories like this shouldn't fade into silence. Subscribe now, not just to listen, but to be part of the change.